Hey, what is going on, webheads? Roundaway here. Like a lot of people, I love indie games, and I grew up playing indie games a lot when I was a kid. Stuff like Shovel Knight, The Binding of Isaac, Castle Crashers, Undertale, Hotline Miami, etc. You get the idea. I love indie games. Even to this day, I still play indie games, although probably not as many newer ones as I should. And hey, one of the biggest series on my channel is an indie game. If you know, you know. There's also been tons of crossover between indie games, whether it be Dead Cells having a bajillion million collabs with other games, vice versa, just a bunch of indie games collabing with each other in general, and a really popular YouTube series, Indie Cross. I'm a really big fan of the fighting game genre, and we never really have big indie game fighting game crossovers. I mean, we've had a few, mainly Indie Pogo and Frame Makers, but both of those are really good games, but they're platform fighters, not traditional 2D fighters, which there's no problem with. I like platform fighters as much as the next guy, but I feel like it's always been weird that we never got a traditional 2D fighting game based off of indie game franchises. Now, there's tons of indie fighting games, like independently made fighting games, but not many where you take a bunch of characters and put them together and make them fight. And that's basically what I'm gonna be pitching in this idea. What if there was like an indie 2D fighting game? Also, somebody please steal this idea from me. Like, please, this video is basically like a call to action. Someone make this game. You can take every single idea from this game and I wouldn't care. I just want this to happen, basically. Like, especially with how unique a lot of indie game characters are, this would just be a really fun game to play. Obviously, feel free to add in. I tried including characters and stuff that I mostly know, like every character I've at least played a game of theirs I included, but there could be like things I'm missing or moves and stuff that I forgot. Basically, the things I'm going to be talking about are, one, the characters, the stages, some gameplay mechanics, and DLC characters, as well as a few other things that I'll get into later. But yeah, that's gonna be it, and let's get into it. Now, like I said, I would want this game to be like a 2D traditional fighter. Something in the vein of sort of like an anime fighter, something like by like Arc System Works / French Bread, sort of, where it's a 2D fighter with like air dashing and like high mobility. The control scheme being light, medium, heavy, and then one unique button that basically is like a character specific action that each character has that's unique to them. The game would be primarily 1v1, but assuming this was made in like an engine like Eichmann or Mugen, where there's already built in like multiple modes where it's like 2v2 and 3v3, but I want this to be mainly focused on just like fast-paced one-on-one gameplay, because there's not a lot of that, especially this year in fighting games. There's already a shit ton of tag team fighting games coming out, and I love tag team fighting games, but I think we need more 1v1 games. I don't really know or care who makes this, but I have some ideas for who could be like a good developer for this game. I think Reverge Labs would be amazing for this, and I feel like they're a severely underrated studio. Like, they should be hired by some other company or something, like, or at least commissioned to make more games in the style of Skullgirls. Specifically that art style. If this game had the Skullgirls art style, that would be insane. Plus, Skullgirls being a really good fighting game in general, and kind of fitting what I'm describing. I also think that the group behind Idol Showdown, Besto Games, could be a really good fit for this game too. I wanted to go for a more traditional style pixel art game. The developer, like I said, really doesn't matter, since this would be an indie game of its own. Like, if this was literally made in like fucking Mugen, I'd be happy with it too. And I think, honestly, having it be in Mugen would also be cool, because you could just download the characters separately if you want to just use them in your own Mugen game, or even add like your own random characters to it. But no matter what, I just want this to be made. Definitely Reverge would be amazing if this was made by them. We're gonna move on to the main thing that most people are probably cared about or even clicked on the video for, is the roster of this game. Now, what I try to do with the roster, I picked obviously some popular characters, some curveballs here and there, and some guilty pleasure like characters that I would just want, like when I came up with this, like, because this idea has just been around in my head for like a good while now, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and there's characters that I made this with them in mind for this game. So yeah, this base roster initially is just 22 characters, and I just chose that number basically because most other indie fighters, like I've mentioned, like Indie Pogo and Frame Makers, usually have this amount of characters or somewhere in between this number, and I think this is like the amount you could reasonably expect. Especially because if this game was likely to be made, probably not even all these characters would be added immediately. Some of them might be added over time just to, you know, for development's sake. Developing like characters as unique as I'm thinking they are is probably going to be a lot, so I think this is a reasonable number. And as I mentioned before, but I won't be talking about that now, is there's going to be DLC characters. Strictly just talking about the base roster, first we're going to go with Shovel Knight, which, I mean, this is pretty obvious. Shovel Knight is like the king of indie games. He's like the mascot of indie games. He's basically everywhere. If you're gonna have a collab with an indie game, you gotta have Shovel Knight in it. And plus, he's already been in a couple fighting games anyway of his own. Also, he's one of the few characters in this roster that's actually been in Smash Bros. Anyway. But what I'm thinking for him and his moveset, I'm thinking of him as like the all-arounder. Like, he would be like the Ryu of this game. Like, you know, kind of the all-arounder, like, jack of all trades. Like, he could do basically everything in a decent level. Although I would say he would be kind of slower just because he is just, you know, a dude in a big piece of armor. I could see him using the propeller blade for mobility. He has the knuckle dusters as like a DP, anti-air. Also, of course, he'd be able to bounce off people in Pogo, but overall, he'd mainly just be using his shovel for his like normal attacks. He'd have his scepter for projectiles and like fireballs. I feel like his unique button, however, would be the item shop that we see in like games like Rivals of Aether and Shovel Knight itself, where you can buy upgrades for him. Main upgrades being a different armor that you can buy for him that enhances his stats in some sort of way. It also changes the color of his armor too. And how the shop would work, it would work how it is in Rivals, where if you beat the enemy up, they drop money from them. Now, obviously, you're gonna be left wide open while the shop menu is up, but that's kind of like the skill of it. You knowing when the right time you have to get like a knockdown set up and then go into the shop and then buy your upgrades. Although I would say, to keep it fair, the upgrades do go away each round and your money resets. Like I said, he's a little basic, but our next Knight character is also gonna be kind of interesting. The Knights from Castle Crashers. Now, with them, it's actually just all of them. It's not just the Orange Knight like it shows in the picture I used for the character select mockup. It's only just him because that's the only one I could fit, but how this would work, if you're wondering, they would all basically have pretty much the same moveset, but their colors, like where you would go to like pick their alternate costumes and colors, would actually change what element there was. And yeah, that's basically, that would be what their special button is, by the way, their element. So red lightning, orange fire, ice, poison. I know some people might be against that because colors in fighting games are important because people like it because it makes their character stand out. Enforcing a color to a different moveset would probably make some people upset because if they wanted to play the Green Knight, but they don't like the poison. But I feel like it's not that big of a deal, and especially if you're playing the Castle Crashers, you're probably gonna pick your favorite color anyway, so I don't really see it as that much of an issue. Plus, it would show that they literally have the same moveset and probably display something in the corner underneath their names showing which knight is which. Minus their unique button, I think they would all be like a kind of rushdown character, because if you play Castle Crashers, you know that the combat in that game is basically just running around and smacking things. I also have really good air combos, in my opinion, because you literally, if you've also played it, you basically like do that one combo where you bounce on their head with the heavy attack and then juggle them in the air with the light attack. I feel like we could incorporate that into their gameplay. Like fast rushdown characters with probably not a lot of health. They wouldn't have like the lowest in the game, but less than most people. Also probably be able to have a special block. They actually pull up their shield and they can block attacks. They'd also have their bows for like range. So you can't really aim or direct them, like they would just go in like a fixed pattern and an arc. They also have their other items too, such as like the bombs and stuff. And one of their supers has to be them using the sandwich to get all big and buff. It's sort of like an install that basically you go really slow, but you're just able to do a shit ton of damage. Going back to their unique attack, each element would be different. For example, the lightning, like you could chain it together, and the more you mash the button, the more damage it does. The ice would basically just be like every fighting game character's ice abilities, you know, like your Sub-Zero, Jin from BlazBlue, or Star-Lord, where they could just freeze you in place. Fire would apply damage over time and also have like the longest range. I feel like the poison would be kind of like the setup version where like you can put different gas clouds on the map, and if you walk into it, you also take damage over time. Except unlike the fire, it actually lingers over time. It's a sort of gas cloud that just stays out. Now, this next character is Hornet from Hollow Knight Silksong. Now, I've played very little of Hollow Knight, and I have not even touched Silksong, but thankfully, I know somebody who's really into it, so I'm gonna let my good pal Jost take care of this.
Hollow Knight Silksong has a lot of movement, abilities, and overall tools. So when it comes to making Hornet as a character, we're gonna have to incorporate all of that. So she'll have two unique gimmicks for her entire moveset. For light, medium, and heavy attacks, the Wanderer's Crest normal slash will be the light attack. It'll be very quick. For the medium attack, it'll be the Hunter's Crest normal slash attack. And the heavy attack will be the Reaper's Crest. Both considering that there's a overhead and uppercut motion, it could be either one as a low or an overhead, depending on how many times you press the button. Or its special button will be red tools. Unique ones such as the Cogflies that can hold down the neutral for you, the one-fold pin as a simple projectile, or unique gimmicky red tools such as the Delver's Drill that could be used as a very extensive air overhead. These tools can be chosen at the character select screen, and you can only have one. For special moves, it would basically be all of Hornet's spells, such as Pale Nails as a basic projectile if you didn't choose a tool as a projectile, a Silk Dash as a gap closer, and Silk Storm as a combo extender. Hornet can also use her signature Clawline ability. This will allow her to throw her needle and then dash towards it, kind of like a super dash from fighters, except it only goes straight. This can be very useful for extending combos and whatnot. And as another special move, there can be another thing that you can also choose at the character select screen, such as her bind. Most of the crests in the game have a unique bind, and all bind would normally do, as in like the normal Hunter and Wanderer's Crest, all it would do would be a mini get off me tool, or it could be this unique type of heal that would take a while and it could obviously be canceled if not timed properly. However, if you select the Reaper Crest, you'll be able to gain more Silk, so you can consistently use this more as a defensive playstyle, or the Witch's Crest as a more of an offensive method of using the bind. Along with this, her aerials, the light and medium, will relatively stay the same. However, her heavy version will be the diagonal pogo that she has. Since you can change your crest, Hornet typically has a dash attack, so depending on what crest you have, it'll also change her type of dash attack. For example, normal Hunter will just be like a slash forward and then a jump up. Reaper is a full-on uppercut, and the Witch's Crest will basically phase through your opponent. Hornet essentially is a character that can basically play into whatever you want. You could choose a defensive playstyle or an offensive playstyle, depending on what tools and crests that you can have. Just like Silksong, there are multiple combinations that you could have, and especially when it comes to a fighting game, this can be very versatile depending on how well you know each tool and each crest that she has. Obviously, for simplicity's sake, there won't be that many. I would say maybe at max 5 red tools, and maybe for simplicity's sake, Hunter's Crest, Reaper's Crest, Witch's Crest, and Architect Crest. You can even just ignore all that and just enjoy her basic moveset, as it will basically be very similar to how it is in Silksong, how she's very rushdown heavy and very offensive. In summary, I like to think of Hornet as a very rushdown focused type of character that has a lot of options in how to approach and what to do after she approaches.
Only you can stop the evil.
Now, when I mentioned before that I had a lot of characters in mind for this idea, Postal Dude was one of them. Like, this is my number one. If someone ever made like an indie fighting game, we need the Postal Dude in it. I feel like he's become an iconic character in his own right, and he's pretty meme worthy. Like, I think most people who use the internet actively have probably seen or at least heard of Postal. I think he would be like a unique brand of goofiness, and with this list I wanted a lot more characters from like rated M games or like more mature games, and I feel like he would fit because he's still goofy, right? But like from an obviously mature rated franchise, I think him just quipping alone and like his voice lines would be really funny to hear. And hopefully we would be able to get like Rick Hunter for this, because like just hearing him alone, it would just make this inclusion worth it. But as for an actual moveset, despite him being like a mainly gun focused character, and you know, Postal's a series that's like, it's a shooter, so you're mainly using guns throughout the whole game, I wouldn't really picture him like that. He's more of like kind of like a mid-range like brawler type character. He'd mainly be using like melee weapons, and ironically enough, like Shovel Knight, he'd start out with a shovel, but I feel like all of his like normals, he'd use different weapons that you get from Postal, like the machetes or the bats and stuff. Now I feel like where his actual projectiles would come in is from his various special moves. He has a bunch of throwable items, mainly in Postal 2, which would probably be the main inspiration for his moveset is Postal 2. So that could be some of his special moves, and for his actual unique attack, it'd just be a weapon wheel, essentially. Like, he could choose which guns he gets. However, they're in random order, and you can only use one at a time. So basically, once you're using, like, let's say you have the options between, like, the AR, the shotgun, or, like, a flamethrower, you'd be able to use one of them for like a period of time before you're able to swap to another one. I think he'd have like far-reaching normals, but he wouldn't really be like a gun character per se. I feel like he'd have like hitbox guns, meaning where like, the actual muzzle flash is where the moves are, like where the bullets will hit. Like, it's not going to be like he's just zoning you across the screen. And now, don't worry, there are actual zoners that use projectiles heavily, but I don't really see Postal Dude doing that. Also, maybe one of his like command normals is him doing the kick from Postal 2, because if you played Postal 2, you know how often you're going to be spamming that kick. And give it the same property it has in the game where it actually reflects projectiles. So like, imagine someone's throwing a fireball at you and you just like kick it back at them. I feel like that'd be funny. Next up, we have Acrid from Risk of Rain. I chose him over all the other survivors, mainly just because he's kind of iconic and probably the most unique of them all, in my opinion. And he's literally the game's mascot, and I feel like his moveset would be good. Now, there's a lot of characters I considered. I mean, my second favorite character is Bandit next to Acrid. I was gonna choose Mithrix or maybe even Loader. I think Acrid would be unique, just mainly because of how he is, because he's like this anthropomorphic creature lizard thing. Like, he's like kind of I don't even know what Acrid is actually, but I feel like he'd be interesting for this type of game, because not a lot of fighting games like in this style, like where it's more fast paced, have these like weirdly shaped animal like characters, because he'd be on all fours. He'd be kind of slow, but his main gimmick, which would be his unique button, would be he's slow on the ground, but he's able to jump. Like, he has that big leap from Risk of Rain. Because for those of you who don't know, Acrid, he kind of leaps around the map and he could spread poison everywhere whenever he lands. That'd make up for his lack of mobility. I'm imagining him being kind of like Blanca from Street Fighter, where he's not that crazy on the ground, but like his air mobility and movement is like really good. He'll also be able to spit the acid like in his other abilities, and it do damage over time. He's able to leave kind of gas clouds everywhere, sort of like what I said about Green Knight from Castle Crashers, except this is more of like a trap where it would be on the ground, and then also he could just poison you outright. Like, I feel like kind of something similar to how MKX, the alien, can like spread the acid everywhere and even damage himself to like put acid on the floor. Out there character that I'm so surprised has never appeared in like a crossover game of any kind is Henry Stickmin from the Henry Stickmin franchise, which, okay, to be fair, I consider it an indie game. It's a Flash game, but it is released on Steam in the Henry Stickmin collection, so I think it counts, and I think he's too funny not to be in the game, especially because he'd be the, like, go-to items character. Like, if you've never played one of these games before, there's characters like Teddy from Persona 4 Arena and Faust from Guilty Gear who are just like unorthodox and weird, and they could like summon out items. And I mean, Henry Stickmin would literally be the perfect and probably only character I could see doing that in this game, because that's literally the whole point of Henry Stickmin. You just kind of choose random options, and the most outlandish things will just happen because of it. Various endings or whatnot, even the fails. And if you want to include it more accurate to the games, have it be so that some of the items can actually hurt you. So you have to be careful with what items, but they're completely random. Like, I feel like this would just be the perfect idea. And a special button would be how you actually throw out random things. As for his normals, they can literally be whatever. Like, his other special moves can have whatever you want, because that's just the thing with him. It's just a bunch of references, most of the things he does anyway, so you could just have it be references to other characters in the actual cast itself. Like, imagine you just summoned a little Shovel Knight to just like attack your opponent, stuff like that. And I mean, he's literally just a stickman, so he'd be kind of easy to animate. This is a character that's kind of out there, and some people might not be happy with this one, but the main character from Mayfumato, which I don't think he has a name, actually, so I guess for the sake of everything, let's just call him the Samurai, or the Ronin, whichever one you prefer. Anyway, this guy is from the game Mayfumato, which is a Souls-like, kind of like Sekiro-style game, but in 2D with pixel art. The game was a Kickstarter that basically, due to unfortunate circumstances, it did release, but they weren't able to actually get all of the money from the Kickstarter, and thus a lot of the game's content was left unfinished. That's why you probably never heard of it, and a lot of people are probably going to say this is controversial because not a lot of people heard of this game, but I mean, you can't have an indie game fighting game without like some more obscure characters, and I think he's probably the most obscure character in this roster. As for his gameplay, like I said, his game is like a Souls-like parry-based game like Sekiro, where like you have to rely on parrying a lot, so that would be his main unique attack button. He'd be able to parry your attacks, and in the game you can actually parry everything and then execute enemies, like basically one-shotting them. Now, how it would work in this, he would have a meter in this. Every time you hit parry, you build up this like little extra meter as well as your super meter. Basically, once this parry meter is filled up, your next parry will basically be an execution. It'll sort of be like a scripted kind of command grab, if you want to call it that, where you just do massive damage to your opponent. Now, he would be really slow, like probably the slowest character in the game. He'd have an air dash, and he'd be able to wall climb and stuff, like how he is in the games. He wouldn't have many combos, so you'd mainly be focusing around your opponent trying to make a mistake, catch them slipping. Kind of like a Hakumen type character from Blaze Blue, where he's really slow and doesn't have much combos, but if he hits you, you're gonna take mad damage. And especially on counter hit, like you might as well just die. Like if he counter hits you, your damage is just gonna be like through the roof. But to make up for the fact that he'd be really slow, he'd also probably have some armor on a lot of his moves. He'd also really be good at breaking your guard. He'd probably be the only character that can actually break your guard. Meaning if you block too much against him, you'll be left wide open and count as a counter attack. Also be able to like eat food and stuff that would like buff him and make him be able to like actually keep up. Like he'd get a little bit faster, maybe have a little bit more health temporarily. He's also gonna have his throwables and his bow from the game to help him actually get in. You know, we have to have Sans. On this list. He's one of the best characters from one of the best indie games of all time, probably, but at least in the past decade. Like I said, with Shovel Knight, he's in Smash Bros, for crying out loud, so I feel like we have to have Sans, and of course, he'd be the premier zoner of the game. He'd have normal similar to something like Hilda from Under Night, where it's basically like kind of like projectiles that are normals, if you get what I mean. Like they're like super long range, like they would be the bones that basically appear in front of him, be able to whack you around with it like telepathically essentially. He'd have like moves that like make them come from the ground and stuff. He'd also have the gaster blasters that would be like a setup projectile, kind of like how Adachi from Persona 4 Arena has Magatsu Izanagi, and he could just set up a 0 and it's a big beam on the screen. Now I think to make up for this, Sans mobility would be not the greatest. He'd have a dash obviously, but he'd have like kind of a step dash, meaning that like he wouldn't have like a traditional dash where you could just hold down the button. He can only go short distances with it, but he teleports when he does dash though, and he's able to like phase out of like the match real quick. Basically, he'll disappear and reappear, and when he's disappear, he'll be slightly invincible, but it's not enough to where it would actually matter usually. It's already slow anyway. So whenever he hits you with like a super move, he'll be able to put karma on you, which will be like a little bit of poison. Like your health will drain slowly, which it won't seem like a lot on its own, but if he's constantly hitting you, it's gonna do a lot. And his unique button would probably be one of my favorites. It'd just be the UI Goku like counter from Dragon Ball FighterZ, where he just kind of stands there and then he'll teleport away. You could actually choose if you teleport away or you just teleport behind them. I feel like he'd have some sort of move, maybe a super, where he'd like throws you all around like towards the end of the boss fight.
Time to paint the town red.
Speaking of zoners, our next character is going to be Peacock from Skullgirls. I picked her mainly because she'd probably be the most unique of all the Skullgirls characters to be in the game, mainly just because of she's like basically a cartoon character. So I think her visuals would be the most interesting, but honestly, the moveset's kind of writes itself. I mean, she is from a fighting game, like straight up, so you can kind of just take all of her moves. You would have to lower the amount of moves she has, because Skullgirls is a 6-button fighting game, kind of like Street Fighter, while this would be a 4-button game. But I feel like to make up for that, because there have been other games where characters that have 6 buttons have been translated into 4-button games, you would basically make like all of her extra moves like command normals. Basically being like forward and the attack button, for example. But yeah, she'd basically be how she is in Skullgirls, being like a really annoying zoner that can just like fill the screen with a bunch of projectiles. And her unique button would be her item drop, which would be different from Henry Stickmin, because his is more just like kind of chaotic, like they just do whatever. These are items that drop from the ceiling, and she can control where they actually fall by holding down the button and how powerful they are. Yeah, I'm trying to speed this up because I know we've been here for a while, but thank you for sticking around this long if you have. But we're gonna move on to just the other fighting game characters, which there's 2 left.
All the way to Merchant Port.
Orcane from Rivals of Aether, and this is another kind of no-brainer pick. This guy is everywhere. He's basically, I'm pretty sure he is the mascot of Rivals of Aether as a series. And his whole gameplay gimmick is basically, he's really fast, like mobile type character with good frame data. His unique attack is this puddle that he could put down. Now this puddle is used for a lot of things, like it enhances his special moves if he's standing in it. You can also use it for extra mobility, being able to teleport to it. So I feel like this would just be his playstyle. Kind of like an aerial acrobatic like character that can like mix you up. Now, the final fighting game character of this is a super oddball pick. Probably most people who are watching this probably have no idea who this character even is. But I think this game's super underrated and probably needs to be here. This character is Paquito. I think that's how you say their name, from the Black Heart. The Black Heart's an indie fighting game from around 2009. was made in Mugen, and it's basically, the best way I can describe it is like if Street Fighter met Silent Hill. Like, it's a horror rated fighting game. Like, it's basically, like I said, Mortal Kombat, Silent Hill, and Street Fighter basically in one game. I feel like this game is too unique and like kind of underrated to not be in this. Especially because the character himself is like a really easy character to put in. He's this like serial killer little murderer ghost kid, and he's basically the game's rushdown character. He could throw his knife and he could just like rush down, he could teleport here and there, and just like, he has like a bunch of fast knife attacks. One of his moves, he literally has like a flurry of stabs and stuff, so he'd be an easy rushdown character to implement. And I feel like for his unique button, it's based off of one of his super moves, or I guess his install super, because every character in the game has an install. He has this move where he basically detaches his head, and his head just starts flying around as a hitbox. That would be one of his supers, but I also feel like that could be his unique button. Taking kind of again from Skullgirls, he'd be able to take his head off and kick it around and stuff, and the head would also be able to, like, you could control it independently from himself and put them in tricky situations. Pilgor from Goat Simulator. Yeah, the fucking goat from Goat Simulator. Now, I have no idea what her moveset would actually be. This is a character that would literally probably just be the joke character of the game, like completely joke. Like, they're just there and like you would just unlock them. Like, they're a goat, there's not really much they can do. Obviously in Goat Simulator, the goats have like weird offhanded abilities, so you could probably make some of that stuff work, but to be honest, I just wanted it there because it would be funny. I did think of a unique attack though. It'd be the tongue, because if you played Goat Simulator, the goat's tongue is like really stretchy and you could stick it to things, and so I would say this could be used for like mobility kind of, or like you could basically tether yourself to the enemy. Sort of like, and this is a really crazy example, Hazama from Blaze Blue, how he's able to like zip around the map and stuff. I feel like that would be this goat's gimmick, but other than that, I literally don't know what the moveset would be. I mean, you know, like just kicks and like ramming, and something to have to do with like ragdolling, like just being able to fling yourself at the opponent. I do request one thing: if there was a super move that they could have, it'd be like Strider's animal super, where he just summons a bunch of animals, and just do that where it's just a bunch of goats that like stampede on screen. We're finally about to wrap up the base roster of the game with these last couple of characters, and then we're gonna move on to stages quickly, and then a few of the DLC characters, and then wrap this video up. And thank you for making it this far. I know this has been kind of long just for these characters, but I wanted to just try to explain them in depth as much as possible. The Terrarian from Terraria is the protagonist character, you know, your little creative character from Terraria. And how I imagine them working, they'd be another all-arounder type character, except their unique attack, which would be their gimmick, is mining. Now, they wouldn't have the Minecraft Steve from Smash Bros. Building, because, to be honest, I don't think anyone wants to deal with that stuff in a fighting game. Much less people don't even want to deal with it in Smash Bros. Because of how annoying it is. So this mining will only work for actually getting materials to craft. Like, he'd be able to basically put down a crafting bench, and he's able to upgrade his gear throughout the game. Use a variety of different ranged and physical weapons, mainly like swords and bows and stuff. You could choose what you want to upgrade. However, you can only upgrade one at a time. So if you do the sword now, you have to still upgrade the bow, let's say. I was thinking about giving him armor, but I felt like that would be more better for, like, you know, actual skins and stuff, because there's not many things that you could really do. I guess you could just give him different default looks, but I feel like giving him different armor, for example, like the hollow armor, would be pretty cool. Some of the pillar bosses you could get from like the Moonlord event, like right before you beat the game, like the solar armor, for example. Super Meat Boy, now this is a character that I feel like deserves to be in the game, just because he's like one of the most iconic indie game characters for a good long while, and I think most people know who he is. Now, the main issue with him, his moveset's kind of tricky because he doesn't really do much. Like, he doesn't really fight. I guess in Super Meat Boy Forever, he does throw punches and stuff, but that's not mainly what he's known for. But he would be a super agile, like, athletic character. Mainly, he'd just be able to jump and, like, air dash and just zoom around all over the map, really. Like, he'd have insane mobility, and be, like, sort of a rushdown type character. except he wouldn't have much range. He is a little stubby guy, like he's just a stubby little meat man, so it makes sense. So I feel like getting more creative with his moveset. I feel like for a special button, it'd be kind of just a generic projectile. It'd be like the saw blades from the games that you could use as a trap, and you could either choose to like set them up in place, like kind of like little traps, or you can make them go off at any time and shoot across the map. You could also throw it in 8 directions, sort of like how Mega Man, you could throw like the metal blade. I also feel like he'd have a passive ability where wherever he moves, he has blood on the floor, and this blood can basically make it slippery for your opponent. Like for you, it would be fine, like you'll just be moving around like normal, but your opponent will like start sliding and make it kind of trickier to just stay in place. And just like the game, he'd have like barely any health. Like he'd be a super glass cannon type character. Like he could kill you fast, but you will die fast. Isaac from The Binding of Isaac, another Edmund McMillen character, but again, Isaac is just such an iconic indie game. And now he would be kind of a zoner character, and he'd be another character that gets progressively better throughout the match. Like his special button would basically be him getting items from the game. And you can only have 4 items at a time, and they're completely randomized, like which ones you'll get. But these are like upgrades to your character. For example, Isaac has a bunch of items that are like active, passive, or just general buffs. So like, let's say he'll get like this mutant spider, which will allow him to shoot 4 bullets at the same time. Or he'll also have like passive items that like just do stuff for him, like protect him and stuff like that. And one of his supers will actually be the D6, and you can re-roll these items if you don't like them. You can discard 1 item at a time by just doing down, down, plus the special button. Basically, you're going to be cycling through items and trying to make a build mid-match, which I feel like would be interesting. I also feel like he'd have the angel and devil mechanics. Like, if he wins, with his health being in a certain threshold, he'll either get an angel or a devil item, and this item will be, like, really powerful and help him out a lot. Aside from that, he wouldn't have many punches and kicks. Like his tears would be his main form of attacking, and he would basically have a few other things in the game like bombs. But again, he's mainly just going to be focused on getting these items and upgrading him. Now, this is a character I also was one of the first that came to my mind when I came up with this idea. Now, he doesn't have a name either, kind of like the guy from Mafato. And him, we're just gonna call him the Vanguard, and he's from the upcoming indie game Ghost Vanguard that comes out this year. Yeah, this game isn't fully released, but there was a demo that you could get on Steam for a limited time. And this is probably one of my most anticipated indie games, or games of 2026 in general. And basically, the only way I could describe this game is DMC meets Dead Cells. It's like if Dead Cells was way more focused on like combos of Devil May Cry, and there's a lot of Devil May Cry energy in this game. So that's basically what Vanguard would be. He'd just be Dante from UMVC 3. He'd have the most moves in the entire game, and he'd just be like an absolute combo demon, and he'd have a unique EX meter that's tied to the special move button, and this is with different combinations and stuff. You can do EX moves like you can in the games. Now in the full game, he'll actually have different like weapons he could use, but for the sake of argument, I feel like he wouldn't have that many different weapons in general. I feel like for right now, if we're just basing him off the demo, he'd just have his straight sword and then a bunch of spells and other special moves that he could just string together. Like you probably just see from the footage what I mean. Like he's just a combo demon. Definitely gonna be one of those characters if you want to show off how good you are at the game. Freddy Fazbear is another character that I'm honestly surprised that we don't get a lot of in games like this. And honestly, it's probably because he's just such a weird character that doesn't really fight at all, well, at least at a traditional means, because he just kind of like jump scares you and it works in the shadows and stuff. I'm imagining a character that wants to get up close to you. So basically, he would be like the grappler of the game and be sort of like a bruiser grappler hybrid, sort of like Jason from MKX. And I feel like his gimmick would be like a fear meter that he would gain by landing enough special moves, and basically it would apply debuffs to you. For example, like it'd lower your movement speed, reverse your controls, stuff like that, basically playing into the whole fear aspect of the Five Nights at Freddy's series. And he's able to pull you in with a microphone. He's able to kind of swing it at you, kind of like Mortal Kombat Scorpion. I know this is out there, but I feel like this would be interesting. You could use his moves from FNAF World, but I feel like they'd just be kind of, you know, it kind of clashed too much for what the idea I'm going for. Zagreus from Hades is a character that's gained a lot of popularity in recent years because Hades is just a great game. And I feel like his gimmick would be kind of similar to Sandalphon from Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, where his unique button would basically allow him to change types, if you will, kind of like Pokemon style. Basically, he'd have different boons from the other gods in Hades. And before the match starts, you can actually change which boons you want to have. And he'd mainly use like spears and his shield for attacks, as well as his bow. Except his bow would be kind of like a rapid fire, shooting out multiple projectiles at once. The reason we're not giving him his sword is mainly just because I feel like there's a couple sword fighters already, and a spear is a more unique weapon, and he'd have like a more long range game from this. He's sort of keep away, like mid-screen poke type character. And depending on which boon he's using changes his special moves. Cuphead would be unique in the fact that he has EX moves gained by how it is in the actual game by dealing enough damage with his projectiles. And these EX moves are able to be done once you have enough cards. It depends on which ammo type you're using, which you could cycle through. And yeah, that'd basically be his gameplay. Like, he'd basically have no actual physical attacks. All of his moves would kind of be projectiles, similar to Mega Man from Smash Bros. And you'd be able to cycle through ammo types, and you could choose how you want to play. You could be a more rushdown focused one that controls down the neutral, or you could just be like a complete zoner and like go full screen if you want to. Like, he'd also have a special move where he could parry projectiles, which will actually send them back at the opponent. If you parry more stuff, the more your EX meter fills. Susie from Deltarune would be an interesting character because she'd be kind of like a grappler slash like bruiser like mix with her giant axe normals and slow huge hitting attacks for massive damage. I feel like her special button would be really interesting. She'd be able to basically tank attacks, sort of like that one Zangief V skill move from Street Fighter V. She could basically armor through some weaker attacks. I also feel like if you hold down the button, she'd have like a mini, I guess you'd call it a projectile, more of a hitbox that does like a lot of block stun. Does a lot of block stun, similar to something like Gogeta Super Saiyan 4's in fighters, like his Ki Blast, where he kind of like winks at you out of like intimidation and stuff. I feel like she'd also have like a passive gimmick unrelated to like the lower health she is, the more damage she does. This whole gameplay style basically comes from like her like intimidating nature in the game and like the rude buster attacks and stuff like that in the game. Okay, now this moveset is really weird, and honestly this character, I feel like if you play them, you're a psychopath. This is Darce from Fear and Hunger, and she'd basically be pretty standard, like just normal move-wise, like nothing too special. She'd just have like really good pokes and stuff. But her main gimmick, if you've played Fear and Hunger, you already know this, or even if you haven't because it's just a meme, the coin flip gimmick, that would be her unique button. Basically, during or after like certain moves and stuff, or after you just decide to do it on your own, you can actually flip a coin during certain moves and it will actually change what happens with the move. This is mainly for like special moves and stuff like that, or just in neutral, and basically if you land on heads, you get a general buff. If you land on heads, you'll get a bunch of debuffs and one like really good buff. Like for example, you'll just get like a general power up to all of your stats if you land on heads, but like it'll be something weird if you land on tails. Like you'll be like severely weakened, but like all of your hits are just counter hits. Like basically you'll take like 4 times the damage, but all of your hits like that will happen next are all counter hits. You can do this during like supers and stuff too to like change the outcome of the super. Like you might actually get hit during your own super, but you gain something from it. Like just like a completely like oddball character, and like one where it's like, okay, you're playing them just pressing their buttons. You'd be like, this is kind of simple, and then the coin flip happens, and then you just have no idea what's happening, and it's gonna be like a real knowledge check for anyone fighting her to keep track of like what's actually happening or not. Also make her gameplay pretty interesting because you'd have to actually like change up your playstyle actively. Last but not least, we got V1 from Ultra Kill. This character would be really weird. They'd be a rushdown zoner hybrid. Let me explain. Like they'd be a primarily gun-based character and they'd have super quick mobility. And every time you land hits, or land shots rather, you keep up your style meter. You can keep up your style meter not just by shooting your opponent, but by actively swapping weapons, and that's what the S button would be. Basically, after like a few taps, like you'll be able to cycle through different weapons, and basically chaining your weapons together will increase this meter. And what this meter does as it increases, well, one, your special meter goes up, like for your supers, as well as actively increase you and your stats. Like, you'd gain more health over time after a certain amount of ranks. You'd also be able to move even faster, and just overall just general buffs to your character. I feel like this represents the game because it's fucking nuts. Like, if you've seen any Ultra Kill gameplay, it's just about you running around as fast as possible, destroying everything in your path while keeping up your style meter. I feel like that was kind of a hard thing to decide for a fighting game, because I didn't want to just make V1, you know, a zoner who just shoots you across the screen. I feel like this was the best compromise I could come up with, but I still think they'd be a really cool addition, and especially Ultra Kill, like, music in this game would be really good. And yeah, with that, we're finally done with the base roster of characters and basically the video, but we're gonna just talk about a few more things, like I said, stages, and then we're gonna get into the DLC, of which I'm not gonna go into too much detail, and there's not gonna be as many just because, well, one, this video is like really long. But yeah, let's get into the stages now. Now we're going to be getting into the stages, and yeah, there's going to be 11 stages with a 12th I'll mention in a bit, reasons, let's call it that. The first stage I want to mention is an easy one, the airship, like from the Henry Stickmin games, because it's kind of an easy stage to do. You could have like the shutter door open, and basically, like, you could see like the outside, like, while you're floating in the air. And yeah, this would just be like the airship. There's actually a part in the game, and I'll probably put it on like screen, the visual of it, in the game where you actually are in this like little, I guess, hangar area. I don't know what it's called, but you'll see what I mean on screen. But yeah, this would just be an easy stage. Or you could have it be on the actual top of the airship itself, either one. I feel like a Terraria stage would be kind of the overworld. There's a lot of different locations in Terraria, but I think seeing it like, it's like a time lapse, basically, the stage. Like, you'll just see in the background, like, basically a Terraria playthrough happening, like, with different, like, weather conditions, different events, like blood moons and stuff happening. And then hard mode with, like, the hollow coming in. Like, I feel like you could just basically make it, like, a sort of time-lapse stage, if you get what I mean. Maybe you could see like different people like fighting bosses and stuff. You could also see the NPCs just roaming around and chilling. For Isaac, there's a couple stages you could do, but I honestly think keeping it simple, burning basement, and the cellar, since they're basically all reskins of each other anyway, and they wouldn't take up multiple slots, you could just have it be like a toggle which one you want to go on. The last corridor would be Sans' stage, obviously, and you could add the little detail of if you're not playing as him, he'll just be there watching. And despite Postal Dude not being his Postal 1 counterpart, I mean, he'd kind of be a mix of all the games, in my opinion. I think we should give him Paradise as a stage, like, but specifically from Postal 1, like, the first level where it's, like, snowy. I feel like just this has, like, a good, creepy vibe to it, and is more unique than just any other Postal stage, because there's not many I could think of. And honestly, they'd all just kind of be, like, deserty locations, and I don't think that would be that appealing looking as a stage. It would make sense, I guess, but I like the snow better. So sorry if you hear me like sound weird. I got kind of sick while I was making this video, so that's why I kind of sound a little bit more nasally. Now, Jost, aka the official Hollow Knight expert, has strongly recommended me that Exhaust Oregon would be a great stage, and I agree with him, it looks nice. I think the little area, like the little casino you fight King Dyson and Cuphead, would be a good area. And also, he needs to be in the background just like reacting to the fight. In the Flesh from Ultra Kill, I just think this would be like a really like grotesque, nasty stage to have in, and it looks cool. Now, you were probably expecting me to say Merchant Port as the Rivals of Aether stage, but I think Jules Vale is like just a cooler looking stage, so I'm gonna choose that. I think Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from FNAF 2 specifically would be good, mainly because it's more open, honestly. Like, I mean, it would be, any FNAF stage could, like, work, but I feel like since this office is just way bigger, it'd make more sense. And lastly, for now, is gonna be Mithric stage, aka, it's like little boss throne room area that you fight him in Risk of Rain 2. I added this one because mainly, I feel like we didn't have many, like, actual arenas, like, made for fighting, so this will make up for the lack of that. And yeah, that's gonna be all the stages, but there is one more, like I said, but I'll get to that when we talk about DLC characters. Now, we finally reached the end of this video with some of the DLC characters I want to talk about. I originally was gonna do 6, but I lowered it to 4 because I pretty much have every character that I wanted to talk about, but these are just a few extras. Now, if you know me, and from the beginning of the video, foreshadowing wise, Class of '09 is a big part of my channel, so
Oh my god, is that my favorite Class of '09 YouTuber, Roundaway?
fuck off! And this is like a really over-the-top, like, crude, vulgar visual novel game, but I feel like this would just be kind of funny because having a character like this who doesn't fight at all is like a weird obsession of mine in fighting games. Like, the characters that shouldn't be able to fight at all being in a fighting game is just really funny and appealing idea to me. I feel like with Class of '09's just like bizarre, like oddly like weird sense of humor and shit. How I imagine Nicole fighting, she doesn't really have that much like crazy stats or moves or anything like that because she literally can't fight at all. So her friends would actually be her unique button and she could summon them out to do different actions. And most of the moves, like I said, would just be jokes and like references to the Class of '09 series. If you even want to get wild with it, you can make her do you know, drugs, I guess, and each of them have an effect, but after a while they go away and you suffer withdrawals. Yeah, no, this is a wild, like, out there, completely just, like, batshit nutso character idea. I just thought it would be interesting, and I thought I'd mention it because of how big of a thing it is on my channel, specifically. Now, for actual characters, Chai from Hi-Fi Rush would be a really interesting character. Since it's a hack and slash mixed with a rhythm game, he'd be able to time his attacks to do more damage and sync them up to the beat, and just overall do better damage because of that. The imposter from Among Us, I genuinely think this would be a cool character because he'd be able to like set traps and stuff around, and he also has like a knife and a gun. There's even a whole Among Us indie fighting game that gives like all of the colors their own individual moveset, so if you want to take from that, that would actually be a cool. Octodad would be the final DLC character, and I think he'd just be a funny little guy to have in the game because it's Octodad. He'd have such weird moves. He'd be kind of like a mix of Merkava and Dawson from Street Fighter, just being able to like shoot at you with like long range normals. I feel like he'd also be able to like suction cup to like the walls and stuff. Like, he'd be a weirdly mobile character just because of how many arms he has and tentacles. And he'd also have a couple of command grabs here and there. Like, he'd be also like just a really odd character to have in, but I also feel like you could include him like shooting ink at you, and if the ink gets on the floor, you're pretty much like stuck in place for a little bit. Honestly, this character kind of sounds toxic, but I don't care, it's Octodad. And with that, that's basically gonna be it for this video. Yeah, this was a really long video, and like I said in the beginning, if anyone wants to make this game, please just steal this idea from me, dude. I don't care. Like, I just want this game to be made, and I can't do it because I suck and I don't know how to make video games. But yeah, let me know who you would want to see or what moves would you give some of these characters, and see ya.